Bienvenidos a este nuevo vídeo de Devir TV. Hoy estamos aquí para hacer una cosa muy especial, una entrevista a dos manos con Vane. ¿Qué tal, Vane?
Muy bien, aquí encantada de estar
Hombre,
contigo.
tienes que estar ilusionada porque
¡Y tanto!
hoy tenemos aquí a Francesco Nepitello.
Nepitello.
¿Qué tal, Francesco? How are you?
Very fine, thank you.
Fine.
Happy to be
Welcome
here.
to Devir TV again.
Yes.
In the new studio.
Exactly, here, cozy place. Yeah. Bueno, hoy vamos a hablar de algo muy especial que es Anillo Único segunda edición. Tenemos aquí un ejemplar muy deseado, único en el mundo mundial. Y con Francesco, bueno, vamos a hablar un poco de su labor y de él como autor de juegos de mesa, juegos de rol, toda una eminencia en este mundo, ¿no? ¿Vale?
Sí, bueno, es la persona de referencia y vamos hoy a poder tocar. Es una pena que no podáis tocar estos mapas porque son una delicia. Así que si queréis, ¿vamos a ello?
Vamos a ello, Vane. Dispara.
Muy bien. Vamos a tener que hacer la entrevista en inglés, pero bueno,
claro.
A partir de ahora tenéis subtítulos por aquí debajo.
Eso es.
Okay, so first I wanted to ask you a bit about yourself and how you get involved into games. How that did started?
Well, I started because I used to play games. I have two brothers, and we played games all the time. I mean, since we were not very distant as age is concerned, we stayed together, and until at least we were 15 or 16 years old, we played all sort of games in the open, because luckily we grew in a house with a garden, but also inside the house, and we discovered war games and board games in general. Yes, and my brother was always very keen on learning rules, so he was the guy that my older brother Giuliano, he was the one that taught us about games. And funnily enough, we also played a type of role-playing game, because we used to play a game where one of us was a sort of a referee and storyteller, and the other players were doing instead, like they were creating a tribe in a prehistorical world or a castle in a medieval world and so on. So we were already very much used to the idea of playing role-playing games when we discovered them in the early 80s. And we started to play D&D with most like everyone, and then moved very quickly to other games, and we never stopped.
And where comes your love for Tolkien and for Middle Earth? It was something that you have read and loved before, or just to do the games?
No, it was something that started almost at the same time of my interest in games. In fact, among the very first games we played was War of the Ring by Richard Berg, a game by SPI. It was, that big spreading simulation game with the axes and all the counters in cardboard that told the whole story of the Lord of the Rings in a way very similar to the way that we did with the War of the Ring many years later. And so we were already fans of the story and read the book multiple times. And we were always talking about the world of the Lord of the Rings. For example, if they ever were going to do a movie, of course we had the cartoon at the time, but we were always dreaming about a live action movie. But yeah, we were not huge fans of role-playing in the Lord of the Rings world, because for some reasons, when we played the old Middle-earth role-playing game, we found it to be either too different from what we expected from Middle-earth. Maybe there was too much magic, or too similar to D&D or something like that. Or maybe because we didn't find the mood, the right mood. So there were things that we were actually thinking about when we started designing this. What can we do different? Not to feel the same way we felt at the time by playing.
And how and why did you start to create games?
Well, I always wanted to do something in a creative field. And with Marco Maggi, my co-designer, we met very early on, many decades ago at school, and we shared the same passion for games. And by the early 90s, we decided that we wanted to do something together in a creative field. And so we started, for example, writing stories, short stories, and writing scripts for movies In fact, we also took part in some contests. We also won a prize for an original screenplay. But then at the same time, we were gamers, so we felt that we wanted to do more in the field of games. And at the time, there were a lot of magazines, so there was a sort of a big movement going on also in Italy. And so we decided to go there and say, maybe, the world of cinema is too crowded. There's a lot of people doing that, a lot of people writing novels. Why don't we design games? We like that, and there's not a lot of people doing it. So,
Which was the first one?
the first game, the thing is that there's also a very good coincidence that in Venice, where we live, and we still lived at the time, there was an interesting fact. Alex Randolph, an American designer, used to live there since many decades already, and he was possibly among the first real game designers. So a guy that lived by designing games and that was a professional. And he was also pushing, that idea that game designers were very important in the creation of the game. They were not simply one piece of the mechanic. They were the main part of designing games. In fact, it's thanks to him and other designers that we designers now have our name on the cover of games, because usually they were just a small name inside the rulebook. And so, for a very big coincidence, there was a pub, an osteria, very close to my house, where a backgammon club gathered. And among the backgammon players, there was Alex Randolph. And also Leo Colovini, who is a designer that used to go to school with my older brother. So we met, we knew each other. And so when we went there to the backgammon club, we discovered that Leo was there, and he was playing Dungeons and Dragons. And we thought that we were the only ones playing Dungeons and Dragons in Venice. And so, okay, there are more people playing that D&D. We started talking, and eventually that led us to cooperate in organizing the tournaments of D&D. And eventually we started collaborating in a studio that still exists now. It's Studio Giochi, that is among one of the most important studios in Europe for designing games and to propose original designs to publishers. They also make a competition called the Premio Archimede that is for original designs. And a good part of the games that participate in this contest are published. For example, Marco Polo, just to say one, is a game that was in Premio Archimede that was published. So we started working with them because they brought us in because we were bringing more knowledge about role-playing games. And in 1991, we published Lex Arcana, that was our role-playing game based on the Roman Empire, on the fantasy Roman Empire. And for a big publisher at the time, Dal Negro, a big company, because it was very good, very well distributed all over Italy. And that was a very big success. So much that 25 years later, we published it again in Kickstarter. That used to be the most successful Italian Kickstarter ever, since it was overcome by more projects later. But at the time, so yeah, that was the beginning of it all a long time ago.
How was the beginning for the One Ring? I think there's quite a story there.
Yes. Yes, the One Ring was very much something I didn't see coming because after publishing Lex Arcana, Magic the Gathering came in 1993, and so RPGs became something that didn't bring enough interest for a designer because they were not really popular. They were less and less popular. Everyone was thinking that Magic the Gathering was a role-playing game, and if you wanted to have your fantasy fix, you just played Magic. You didn't play D&D or anything else. So less and less people was interested in role-playing games. And so we moved on designing board games instead, trying to find an interest in thematic board games. And in 2004, together with RS Games, at the time was Nexus Games, and Roberto Di Meglio, me and Marco Maggi, we designed War of the Ring. And because that was a dream come true for us. Because one day Roberto Di Meglio came to us by saying, how would you design a game on the War of the Ring if you could? And so we started throwing ideas. I would do this, I would do that. We based a bit our design on the old War of the Ring game by Berg, because it had the right size, the right scale. It had everything, the characters and the strategy part. So we said, how can we do something similar but different, something more playable, something that is closer to the story? And we brought everything we knew about games and about the Lord of the Rings. That was already a passion for us, but became something where we had to study every line, everything. If you know the War of the Ring, La Guerra del Anillo, every piece of the game is really straight out of the books. All the names of the cards, every element is from there. So we were completely 100% into that. And it was a big success. The game was published in a number of languages. I lost count. And it's been in publication since 2004, so it's 17 years now, and it's going strong still, with 2 special editions, 2 expansions, without counting one for the first edition. So that brought us to the attention of the general gaming public as designers who could do the Lord of the Rings, who could do justice to the Lord of the Rings. And that's why some fans of War of the Ring, namely people like Xavi Garriga and Joaquim Dorca, who loved the game and who published the War of the Ring, came to us. And it was actually Joaquim who called me one morning at the phone, at the time when you actually picked up the phone and called people instead of sending a WhatsApp message or something like that. And I was completely surprised because it was early in the morning, and also, why is Joaquim calling me? We knew each other, but we didn't have much to do apart from the War of the Rings, so we didn't have many business relations. We saw each other each time in Essen and Nuremberg, but that was a new thing for me to talk about something new. And he proposed me, how about you design a role-playing game on the Lord of the Rings and we publish it?
So, out of the blue.
Yeah, out of the blue. And as I told you, it was something that I completely didn't want to do since 1991. I said, okay, I already gave my contribution to the role-playing game world by doing Lex Arcana, but I kept playing. So I was still a role-playing gamer at heart. That's why I love thematic games like War of the Ring. It's not, I'm not one for abstract games. So when he said that, I started thinking what I should do if I was really doing it. Maybe I'm not going to write it. Maybe I can do the design with Marco and someone else can write it. I even tried to involve Greg Stafford, the designer for Pendragon and RuneQuest, because he was one of my favorite designers ever. And I thought that he could do justice to the Lord of the Rings if he was interested. He was very much into designing thematic games, of course, focused games. But that didn't, luckily, that didn't go through, and they kept on pushing me in doing that. Robert Hyde from Sophisticated Games was very much in the idea of doing that. Eventually, for some reasons, Devir, so Joaquim and Xavi, came out of the project. They didn't think it was, they were ready to do that. So it was me and Robert Hyde, and we started again to work on my proposal, because still everything in my proposal is here. The main idea is that instead of making a game like Middle-earth role-playing game that was mainly about geography, so covering, the thing that is most famous about that game are the maps.
Yeah.
People are in love with the maps, the fantastic maps by Pete Fenlon, who basically designed every corner of Middle-earth, even parts that Tolkien never actually designed. So it was about covering everything. Where I think the Lord of the Rings is much more about history than geography. It's more about the depth of many decades rather than knowing what's behind every corner at the end of every street. Also because if you are someone living in Middle-earth, you, as Sam Gamgee says, you don't know what's beyond maybe 50 miles from your home. So if you want to if you want to really play like you're living in Middle-earth, you cannot know everything about Gondor and Rohan and the Lonely Mountain, and even beyond that, invented realms like Harondor or Harad. What's in Harad? We don't know what's in Harad, based on the stories by Tolkien. So we said we should bring back a perspective like that. And Robert Hyde from Sophisticated Games isn't really a publisher, so they needed a publisher, and we found it in Cubicle 7, that at the time was a not very well-known company, and they were doing, I think, Doctor Who at the time only as a main title. And there was another coincidence, because I would have liked to work with an artist that I knew about, John Hodgson, and they said, oh, we know John Hodgson very well, and he's actually one of our collaborators. So the One Ring was born. It took, of course, a couple of years to actually write the game, because in the end I had to write it. So I could not simply design it. I had to write every word of it, and John Hodgson illustrated the most of it, and it was a good success. It was a good success because our idea of focusing the game very much, instead of a wider region and lots of different cultures, to make it really focused. In that case, in the case of the first edition of the game, it was based around Wilderland. It worked. People liked the idea that they could write their own saga, their own stories, because it's a time frame between The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings that is not descripted in the stories, but gives you the freedom to play.
Is that why you choose that period of time exactly, or?
Yes, because I remember that one of the things that made me not really interested in playing Middle-earth role-playing game was because they chose a time frame that was centuries before the War of the Ring. I know why they did that, because it was from a lot of points of view a more interesting time frame, because there were wars between the realm of Arnor and Angmar and so on. But it's something that is described in the books in a few paragraphs in the appendixes. So if you're not a Tolkien scholar, if you're a reader and a fan of the stories, the Middle-earth is the Middle-earth of The Hobbit or The Lord of the Rings. And what not a lot of people really realize, that there are almost 70 years between the two stories. It's 2941 in The Hobbit, and it's 319 in The Lord of the Rings. So there is a lot of time to play. And why not use that time frame where we know something, but we don't know everything? So everything you can do there can be something that wasn't mentioned in The Lord of the Rings and wasn't mentioned in The Hobbit, but could have happened. And also we started to exploit some things like inconsistencies that were a good hook. For example, the whole campaign that is based around Wilderland in the first edition of the game, that is shown in the supplement, The Darkening of Mirkwood, is about the fact that in The Hobbit, the woodmen of Mirkwood are mentioned as being like a strong folk living in the vale of the Anduin River, but they are not mentioned in The Lord of the Rings. They only mention the Bjornings. So what happened? So instead of saying, okay, that's Tolkien that changed his mind and simply is calling the Bjornings, I mean, the woodmen became the Bjorning probably because Bjorn became a leader of men and so on. But why shouldn't we think there was more? And like the woodmen were a strong folk at the time of The Hobbit, but something happened and they became basically disappeared by the time of The Lord of the Rings. So the whole story of The Darkening of Mirkwood is about that, is about the diminishing of the people of the Anduin Vale. And if you play that campaign, you can do something about it. So that was a very, very much an example of what you can do with the Lord of the Rings, without breaching canon, but inventing some very strong stories in the same world.
And when did you realize that you need to do a second edition, a different one?
Well, the thing is that we're basically coming full circle with this, because if you see the very first edition of the game, we had a slipcase edition of the game with two books inside, and then we made a revised edition in a single volume. In the first edition, we mentioned the fact that our intention was to make 3 games, basically. One set around the early decades between The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. Then a second one that brought the story closer to the War of the Ring. And the third one that is basically during the War of the Ring. Okay? Because the idea was that if we're playing for 60, 70 years, at the beginning you are going to play characters that are not known at all as heroes in The Lord of the Rings. And by the end of the 70 years period, you will have either the descendants of the first one, if you're a mortal man, or even the same character if it's a dwarf or of an elf, but with a completely different curriculum as a hero, because you would be the guy that, for example, stopped the darkening of Mirkwood or fought the Nazgul in Dol Guldur. So you can be someone. So the idea was that by the third game, you will be someone who might show up at the Council of Elrond in the place of Legolas or Gimli. Because Legolas and Gimli, who are they before the Lord of the Rings? Nobody. I mean, they're told, oh yeah, it's the son of Thranduil, is the son of Gloin, but before that, they're
nobody.
Yes. So instead, you could have, I don't know, a hobbit that
following
the steps of Bilbo Baggins, who became a hero. So that was the idea. So with the new edition by Free League, we're almost following the same idea, because we are now. The first game was based in 2941. This one is based in 2965. So it's more than 20 years later. So the chronology is advancing. We moved from Wilderland to Eriador, and bringing, in some ways, the game closer to the roots of The Lord of the Rings, while Wilderland was closer to The Hobbit, because it's where the Hobbit action happens. While in Eriador, there's the seed of The Lord of the Rings, because it's where the ring is hidden. So we brought the focus in the area that everyone is more familiar about, because they know about the Shire, they know about Breeland, they know about Rivendell. And also, it's a different mood compared to the first edition. First edition was more about an optimistical look, because the dragon is dead, and the realm is flowering again, and people is trading. While moving to Eriador, we're trying to cast a somber light, because Eriador is still the land of the lost realm of Arnor, where mostly everything is deserted or ruined. So it's more about bringing adventure to a sort of a discovery and exploration mood. In historical terms, we changed publisher. So, so yeah, and that's another life achievement, because I was a big fan of Free League before we even thought about collaborating with them. For many reasons, we stopped our collaboration with Cubicle 7 around 2018, I think, and no, 2019 probably, yeah, no more than. Yeah, it took us 2 years basically to consolidate the collaboration with Free League, because I remember that 2 years ago I was still seeing them in Essen as a fan, because I went there to just meet them, because I wanted to meet the people who were doing Forbidden Lands and Coriolis, and those games I really liked. And when I met them, we found that they shared the feeling, because they liked the One Ring. So eventually, when months later I had to look for a publisher for the new edition of the game, after a while, not immediately, after a while I thought, the only guys that didn't come knocking to our door were Free League, but I really would like to see them publishing the game, because I really like everything they do from the point of view of production and so on. And so, yeah, I called them. And the thing started, and eventually we were able to do this. And so we're there and back again.
And this new edition was financed by a Kickstarter that was hugely successful.
Yes.
Did you expect that? How did you react when you see the numbers going up and up and up?
They were, Free League has been doing Kickstarters since a while. They kickstarted mostly every game, all of them apart from Alien. And I was hoping, of course, for a good success. And my goal was to do more than their previous Kickstarter, but that was all. And I think that we overcome their previous Kickstarter in the first 2 hours. And so,
Wow.
so it was that in that moment that I saw, okay, must be a good combination of several things, of the fact that we were coming with a not a hugely successful first edition, but a fan favorite. It was a game that had a cult following. And so there was a lot of people that wanted to see continue. And so they came aboard. At the same time, we had all the fans from Free League that are already a following, that are very interested in almost everything they do because they know the love they put into their products and so on. So it was that, plus, I don't know, maybe the pandemic. Really no idea, but it was really way beyond any of our projections. What I'm really happy about is that between us and them, we didn't lose focus. We didn't overpromise. We actually have already since a while the physical thing earlier than I thought. Now we're having some problems with distribution as everyone else in the world, but the game is done and the standards of production are amazing.
Yeah.
So I can't be more happy.
And just focusing on the book, which are the big changes that players from the first edition will find in here?
Well, there's more than probably they can expect because the changes grew in the making. When I already started working on a new edition of the game when we were still attached to the previous publisher, but the point of view was really different. So when I came back to the beginning, I said, what can I do to make this better than before? So there were a few things that I thought needed to be changed, because even if a lot of players got used with them and didn't notice them anymore, I remember well the beginning, so the entry level for the game wasn't that easy. There were a few hiccups in the character creation and several things that I would have done differently. Then also there's a problem that when you you give freedom to a designer, you probably have to stop him changing too much. But in general, I think that we kept all the things that made the One Ring good, and I think we made it better because, of course, there will be people that won't be happy with some of the changes because they're used to the way the game worked before. But I'm seeing that right now that the game is out and people are playing with the PDF, are seeing why we changed things. And because one thing is to see a change simply on a theoretical point of view and not agreeing with it. The other thing is when you're playing the game and you see how the changes work better with the gameplay. The game is much better from the point of view of the flow. It's much easier for the lore master, for the game master to play, because there are less things to think about. So I'm really happy about the whole package in the end.
And I know that many people are worried because the books from the previous edition are really good and they will be not publishing the new edition. But are they going to be compatible? You can use the first edition supplements with this new edition?
Yes. One thing that we promised with the Kickstarter is that we will make available all the existing cultures, the main ones from the previous edition, with a separate publication that we're working on. And so you will be able to port your existing character, for example, or you can continue to play your campaign if you're playing in Wilderland, for example. You don't want to lose that. If you want to keep playing the Darkening of Mirkwood, you will continue. All the material that is inside the actual supplements, like character stats and so on, are easily adapted. Also because in the bestiary inside here, we have a good selection of creatures that can either simply replace the creatures you have in a supplement, or can be used as the starting point of an adaptation. So it's not. The One Ring has always been a quite a transparent game system that is easily disassembled and put together again. So it's not a super complicated game where if you change something, maybe something else is not going to work. So if you want to reconstruct something from the previous edition, you can do it with the second, especially when we will make available the existing cultures.
Also, I guess that the background, the geography is the same, so you can use all this kind of fluff that
Absolutely,
it's in the books.
Yeah, everything else. Well, one thing that we're doing, we are acknowledging the existence of the stuff we described in the previous editions in subtle ways. Mentioning some characters, mentioning some event. So this is the direct continuation of the other game. In fact, again, continuing on the idea of history rather than geography, the One Ring first edition is the past of the One Ring second edition.
Yeah.
So it's not simply made obsolete because here you have everything again. Also, that's one of the reasons why we didn't repeat everything. This is not the One Ring in Wilderland again. Otherwise, we would have given you the same stuff over again. Yeah. So that's a game, and this is another. They can stand back to back on the shelf, and you can use one or the other, and especially all the historical elements can be used. Absolutely.
If you want to play on previous ages, you can play the first edition.
Years before.
Decades before, exactly. Yeah. If you want to start into 941, right after The Hobbit, to 942.
At the middle of the campaign, you change to the second edition. Yes.
No, I'm. In fact, that's why I was saying it's coming full circle with the original idea, because eventually, maybe in a few years' time, we'll do another edition of the game that instead of being 2965 will be the year 3000. So very close to the War of the Ring.
But the edition and the aspect, the graphics, everything seems to be a darker age. That's made on purpose.
The whole thing that we decided to do from the point of view of the graphics especially is also, of course, to give that idea that the world is less colorful and so on. We want to, of course, to remain in the same idea of Middle Earth as described in the stories. So I think that this is very, very close to the idea that people, very faithful to the idea that people has of the Lord of the Rings and Tolkien in general. For example, all the layout, all the colors in the layout, and all the elements have been studied to, in some ways, recall the idea of notebooks by Tolkien with scribblings and stuff. So it's very analogic. It's completely opposite of some modern games with everything is very digital. We have all the pencil pieces and stuff like the graphical elements that are not rigid. They're handmade. So it's something that wanted to give to people the idea of an ancient world instead of something that is too modern. So, but at the same time, yes, we wanted to be more melancholic, darker, because Eriador is all about a lost glory of a past age and ruins and
Regarding
stuff like that.
About handmade, you told us the story about the maps that
yes,
they are all handmade.
It's something that most people really don't realize is the amount of work that went into those two maps by Francesco Nepitello that made the Eriador map. Too. Yes, also there inside the book, a map of Eriador and a map of the Shire that is in the starter set. Yes, because we didn't mention, we also finally, for the first time, we have a starter set.
Very cool.
I wanted to ask you about the books that are on the line, so don't worry.
So yeah, the map of Eriador and the map of the Shire are, I think, a work of art, especially also because by studying the Shire, I realized that basically there are no really faithful maps of the Shire out there, even if there are a lot, because there are some mistakes that, for example, in the famous Fonstad Atlas of Middle Earth have been repeated several times. and are not consistent with the text. So we studied a lot. I'm sure that will be mistakes anyway, but I think that at the time, this map of the Shire is the most faithful that has ever been done before. So
Wow.
I think that the both maps are really interesting also for the Tolkien fan, not simply for a role player.
Yeah, and you were talking about the beginner's book. So what can we find? What is on the pipeline?
Yeah, the starter set. About the core game, we have the core book that is fully complete. I mean, inside you have all the rules for all the cultures that are that can be found in Eriador mainly, and creatures and rules for the game master and so on, journeys, combat, and councils, plus a playable landmark that is the new format that we have for adventures, very much inspired by adventure sites in the game Forbidden Lands, that I found to be a very good way of making adventures that are not railroaded. They are more about a location rather than a sequence of events. And so I think that especially for Eriador, this was a good formula to locate a number of places or locations that we wanted to describe and to present them like that. So it's more sandboxy, the way that we want the One Ring second edition to be played, compared to, for example, first edition, where we had many anthologies of adventures that were very driven by a plot. Eventually, of course, most players and lore masters played them the way they wanted, but if you played them exactly the way they were written, they were very strict. They were very tight. The landmarks are made in a way where you can weave the actions of the players better with events and stuff like that. And so we have this. We have the lore master screen that has a booklet about Rivendell and the high elves of Rivendell inside. And we're finished, and these are printed and being shipped. And we have in the pipeline, we have Ruins of the Lost Realm. That is the main book about Eriador and the Lost Realm of Arnor. So it contains information mainly about the city of Tarbad. That is going to be our focus. A ruined city, abandoned since 50 or 60 years, that again, we're playing up the gray areas that Tolkien didn't really investigate, because we know that the city is basically completely abandoned by the time of the War of the Ring. But what happened? It was a city still when we know that in 2912 it was flooded and people left the city. But you don't leave a city like that. You don't leave a city in a few months. So
there's always someone that wants to stay at home.
yes, so we decided to populate the area and to give a more flexible and more interesting story. And it's written by Gareth Hanrahan, who is the guy behind the Dark Eomer Record and a very well-known writer for many games and a super good Tolkien expert. And in addition to that, the Lost Realm of Arnor also will have 12 locations, including some of the more famous ones like Weathertop or the ruins of Anuminas. Anuminas here. And to be used in any way you want. So it can be used as part of a campaign or as or a one-shot adventure and so on. Already done, already printed and also being shipped, but I haven't seen it yet, differently from this that is here, is the starter set. The starter set is a beginner box for people new to the One Ring, that, again, instead of simply doing a reduced version of this, we decided we had to work more.
That's always good.
And we made this box that is all about the Shire of the Hobbits. So we said that to do justice to the Hobbits, that are one of the main elements in Middle-earth, especially for readers of The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, was to do something that could be self-contained, because it's hard, of course, to mingle, the day-to-day banality of Hobbits with high adventure. So we said, why don't we do high adventure, but from the point of view of a Hobbit? So what's what's an adventure like if you're a hobbit when you're not involved in a big thing like going to kill Smog with 12 dwarves, so with 13 dwarves. And so in the end, we made this that is something that you can play with pre-generated characters. You have it's a full box because there's a Shire sourcebook that describes the Shire. Some people can say that a lot of stuff you can find there. You can find it also in the Concerning Hobbits opening of the Lord of the Rings book. But it's been written by James Spann, who's really a hobbit in spirit. And so, yeah, he was able to weave everything that we already know because Tolkien told us already in the book in a way that is so personal, so much from a hobbit point of view that is fresh. And also there's new stuff, of course, that we had to add, more information, something maybe is gleaned from a sentence somewhere, from The Hobbit or from The Lord of the Rings, or is just inspired by. Everything seems like in the right place. And these two maps are going to be there, not the cloth maps, but the paper ones are in the starter set. In addition to the Shire source book, we have an adventure booklet that has a sort of a campaign for hobbits. And what, again, instead of simply having adventures and to create invented characters, we took hobbits that are actually part of the canon, because we have characters like Bilbo Baggins. You can play actually Bilbo, so you can use the ring, for example. And also you can play his companion Balin, because Balin was one of the dwarves from the Hobbit expedition that used to come and visit Bilbo in the Shire. And the other characters are all hobbits that Bilbo involves in adventures, because he is nostalgic about his adventure in Wilderland. So they are involved. They are younger hobbits, and coincidentally, these hobbits are going to become important because they are, for example, Drogo Baggins, who's going to be the father of Frodo, and Lobelia, that will become Sackville Baggins, and in the Lord of the Rings, and so on. So everyone is a character that is either an ancestor, not an ancestor, but a father or mother of someone from the Fellowship of the Ring. So in a way, we are like giving a reason why these characters like Merry, Pippin, and Frodo and Sam are so adventurous differently from other hobbits. It's actually because there were their fathers and mothers before them that actually already had that inclination.
It was on their blood.
Yeah. So you're playing characters that will feel part of the story anyway. You're not playing an invented character, but you're giving a backstory to those characters that you read about in the genealogy in The Lord of the Rings.
That's great. And do you have some plans for the future of the line? Do you know what are you going to do next?
Yes.
Because now that's something everybody's wanting to know.
The main thing, of course, in the horizon is the Moria Moria publication that is in an advanced stage, because Gareth has been working on that since a while now. But since we were also a bit, I can say, really unprepared, but surprised a bit. Yes, we were surprised. I have to be honest. I mean, we knew we were going to be successful with One Ring, but not that much. We are reconsidering a few things about the future of the line, and so some of that is going to be affected by these change of plans. I can't say much because there are also production reasons. We might have another Kickstarter or maybe not. There's also the 5e adaptation that is still, has been, Jacob Rogers has been working on that. The adaptation to, Jacob Rogers was already a collaborator of mine on the One Ring in the past, one of the bigger fans of the game, that used to take care of the adaptation of most of the supplements to Adventures in Middle-earth. And we're going to make a new edition of that. Again, like the One Ring, we're doing another 5e adaptation of the One Ring. Jacob Rogers worked on that, and so possibly it could be the next thing that will be out yet. But it's still to be decided again if it's going to be a pre-order, if it's going to be a Kickstarter or not. So yeah, I'm not really prepared to say much about what's behind the corner, but just to make sure that one is the 5e adaptation, the other one is Moria. So
That's going to make a lot of people happy, because I have been questioned about the Moria a few times yet. So
That's good. Francesco, just for concluding this, nowadays when Lord of the Rings game gets out, your name is associated a lot of times, like you did it with Lord of the Ring, with One Ring, the La Búsqueda del Anillo, the Search of the Ring, and you put the level very, very high. But everything could have been bad, because Lord of the Rings is a big institution and has a lot of fans, and they are super faithful, and they see everything like very, very clear. And it didn't. That the people loves the game, the fans of Lord of the Rings loves your games. So you felt overwhelming at the beginning when you had this thing in your hands.
well, the good thing was that, I don't know if I was lucky or whatever, but I was really focused. I had an idea of how the game should have been for me to like it. And I was lucky because what I liked was something that a lot of people liked. I'm not sure if the game could have been more successful with first edition, especially, possibly, because right now the gaming world is different, and I think that people now appreciates when a game has a distinctive personality. So instead of finding, okay, that's a Lord of the Rings fantasy role-playing game, anything.
Yeah.
Like, okay, I can be a ranger, I can be a Radrim, I can be an Easterling, renegade, and let's play together in Bree. Right now, people want to find something different and special in a game that is not simply a run-of-the-mill role-playing game. At the time when the One Ring came out, this wasn't really true. It was more of a bet that we made. In fact, not everyone shared that idea. And our early playtests were really badly accepted by the playtesters, because they were thinking more in the line of games like the previous one, like the one from Decipher, that was very much a D&D lookalike. And so they thought, okay, we're going to get immediately Riders of Rohan and Gondorians and just do what we want, like a toolbox that we can pick and play. Where actually many games, especially modern ones, have taught people that if you give the players the choice of doing everything, not everyone is going to be able to play really well. I mean, to really capture the spirit of a world, if they just can do anything. Because even when you read the stories of any story, for example, if you were reading the Harry Potter stories, if the Harry Potter stories were not about the school of Hogwarts, but was about the world of Harry Potter, and you could do anything, but not the people in the school, is that going to be a Harry Potter role-playing game anyway? Probably not. So what you have to do is to narrow down the choices that allow you to be really close to the spirit of the story. And that's what we did, to try and capture the point of view of someone who lives his home and never heard anything about elves in Lorien or hobbits in the Shire if you're from Rohan and so on. So about being dispirited or being worried about the success. I was worried, of course. I was really worried. In fact, I had a bad time before the release of the game, a sort of a stage fright. Okay, we're almost there, and now I'm worried that people is not going to like it. But when I was designing, I said, I couldn't design it differently from that. Yeah. So that was my idea. I wanted to do it like that. It was all or nothing.
So now, if you have to design another game based on a literary novels, which one will you choose? If you can choose, whatever you want.
Well, I was lucky because I made games based on several IPs that I really liked. We even made the Age of Conan strategy game that wasn't successful as the War of the Ring, but it's a game I really like, and I'm really happy with it. Another game that has a very niche market is our Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell board game that we made with Osprey. And that's a world that I would find interesting for a role-playing game too. The world of Susanna Clarke's Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, because it's a deep world with a very alternate history of magic that I find really challenging, and how it could be designed could be really interesting, and also really fresh from the point of view of fantasy gaming in general, because there are not much Napoleonic era games with magic. Probably it would not going to be very successful because, of course,
who knows?
You know, the novel was very successful, but not at the level of Hunger Games or other things. But it has a cult following, and it's been published in countless countries. But it's a sort of a sophisticated type of thing that could work. I think it could work. You know, today, the thing that we have, Kickstarter, for example, it's a good thing from the point of view that you can do things that do not necessarily have to appeal to a wider market. I mean, we had 17,000 backers for the One Ring. I think in excess of that. And it's a very big number for any type of publication, even if it's a mainstream release. But if you can get to 5,000 backers, you're fine. I mean, it can be more than enough to finance your game and make a profit and everything. So you can be less prone to compromise when you do something, because you can say, okay, I need a number of people that is interested in this, and if I am interested, maybe someone else is also
focus on something.
Yes. So I think that's a good thing for designers in general, to think that if they have an idea that is original, is less dangerous than in the past, or less difficult than in the past to find someone wanting to publish it.
What?
Okay, Francesco, Vane, thank you very much for the interview. It has been a big pleasure to talk with you about the One Ring, the second edition that's coming. Thank you very much, and hope it's a super big success like the first one. We will have a lot of adventures there.
Thank you very much.
Chicos y chicas, nos vemos en el próximo vídeo. Espero que hayáis disfrutado mucho de esta entrevista. A darle caña. Hasta el próximo vídeo.
Yes.
Bye bye.